Personally, I'm an atheist, but that doesn't mean I bear any ill will toward those who hold religious beliefs, necessarily. I figured out a long time ago that if the only major disagreement we have is over the existence of God, that's close enough for me to consider us on the same side. Religious folks who see their faith as a warrant to mistreat and persecute others, and who work to impose the narrow tenets of their faith on everyone else, are my enemies. But religious folks who see their faith as motivation to be better people and to work to make the world a better place are my allies, and I'm happy to have them. I even envy them, in a way. If you're a person of sincere faith and you truly believe in your heart that this life is not the end, that within each of us is an immortal spirit that continues on beyond our mortal existence, and that belief has allowed you to live without fear of death, I'm jealous. I wish that were true. You believe it is, and live with the peace and reassurance that comes from believing it, which is the next best thing to it being true, I suppose. So, congratulations, I guess. Obviously, there are people who use their religion to do bad things, to justify their prejudices, to exploit and mistreat and unjustly discriminate against people, to claim undue special privileges for themselves. And obviously, these people exist in all kinds of religions. But I want to talk about a particular subset of bad religious people, and specifically within Christianity. Because as an American, Christianity is the religion I'm the most familiar with. The type of Christian I'm about to describe isn't the worst or the most hateful or the most stubborn obstacle to progress and social justice, again, necessarily, but they are one of the types I've had the most firsthand experience with, because I've had some of them in my extended family and elsewhere in my social circle, and they're just not pleasant to be around, you know? I'm talking about Christians who insist on making their Christianity the topic of every conversation. And I mean every conversation. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. If one of this type of Christian is present when it's their turn to contribute to the conversation, they will make it about Jesus. It's not unusual, I suppose, for people of faith to believe that their God should be the most important part of their lives. If you believe in an omnipotent, personal God like the one proposed by Christianity, I guess that makes sense. God created the universe, but he also created you, and he's paying attention to what you do and how you live your life. So sure, prioritize that relationship, if you want to call it that. It seems as though many Christians take a more relaxed interpretation of this prioritization. Just as they believe God is present in all things, so too do they believe that their faith in God is represented in all facets of their lives, whether they make a point of bringing God into it or not. In this way, they can keep God in their hearts as they go about their earthly business without having to make God the constant center of attention. There is a flavor of Christianity, however, in which the faithful take this idea of prioritizing God literally and to the extreme. They do make him the constant center of attention. God comes before all else: family, personal interests, work, everything. My maternal grandfather, not the one who used to own the house I live in now, the other one, was a preacher. And whenever there was a lull in the conversation or he didn't have anything useful to say, he would blurt out, "Praise the Lord." Even as a young child, still many years away from coming to terms with my own lack of belief in the Lord which he was continually praising, I found it really fucking annoying. But my grandfather's failed catchphrase is one of the less obnoxious examples. I've been far more aggravated over the years by the Christians who not only insist on mentioning God or Jesus as often as possible, but who take every opportunity to resentfully assert the primacy of their religion. I see they got that new Toy Story movie. What was that song in that first one? "You've Got a Friend in Me." They ought to be teaching the children to sing "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." I don't care what the Walt Disney Corporation thinks. No matter how much you love him, that raggedy talking cowboy doll cannot redeem your pitiful soul. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Maybe not that exact gripe, but the angle, the tone, the critical attitude badly disguised as compassionate concern. There are so many different aspects of the right-wing Christian American conservative worldview wrapped up in that attitude that, while I find it extremely disagreeable, I can't deny that I'm also fascinated by it. You've got the weariness of the pious person surrounded by the impious. Oh Lord, will these poor lost sheep ever find their way? You've got the disapproving shaking of the head at this fallen, sinful world. You've got the implied separation of themselves and, if they're feeling generous, their fellow believers from that sinful world because they had sense enough to give their heart to Jesus and be saved. It's telling how much of modern American right-wing Christianity can be reduced down to a series of excuses for looking down your nose at other people, isn't it? The Christians who do this aren't just annoying because they compulsively jam their religion in wherever it will fit, whether it belongs there or not, but also because when they do so, they show no respect at all for little things like context or history or even geography. And yes, I am thinking of something specific related to that last one. So, snaking through the western Maryland county where I was born and have lived my whole life is a modest waterway called Antietam Creek. The Battle of Antietam during the American Civil War took place alongside a section of it, which is how that battle got that name. Several miles north of the battlefield is a stretch of Antietam Creek that is called Devil's Backbone. I have an old friend, and my old friend used to have a mother-in-law, and once I was with my friend and his two sons, who were just toddlers at the time, and my friend mentioned something about taking the boys to Devil's Backbone because in addition to the creek, there's a nice little park there with playground equipment and spots where you can fish. It's a lovely place, actually. And my friend's mother-in-law kinda snorted scornfully and said, Devil's Backbone. They should have called it Jesus's Backbone. I didn't say anything at the time. Picking a fight with my buddy's mother-in-law would have only made life more difficult for my buddy, but did she think they named it Devil's Backbone as a tribute to the devil? Here's an aerial view of the area around Devil's Backbone. Let's see if we can find any clues as to why it might have been given that name. See how crooked and serpentine the creek is? Those are appropriate adjectives, as the devil is noted for being a former serpent and is not noted for being terribly honest or trustworthy. That might be a good guess, but actually that's not why it's called Devil's Backbone. That stretch of the creek is named after this land feature here. See that ridge of land there between Antietam Creek and Beaver Creek with Lappin's Road running across it? That's Devil's Backbone. Backbone because the ridge rises up between the two creeks like a spine, and Devils because of how treacherous that road was to travel once upon a time. It's safe now. It's a modern paved road with guardrails. It gets a little narrow in spots, but I've driven it hundreds of times and never had a problem. However, before it was paved and before there were guardrails, when people did their traveling on horseback or driving horse-drawn carriages, it was a much more nerve-wracking crossing, I'm sure. Usually when something is named after the devil, it's because that thing is dangerous or inhospitable or associated with something grim. Gettysburg Battlefield is about an hour from here. There's a place there called Devil's Den. It's a hill covered with enormous gray boulders made of a hard igneous rock called diabase. During the Battle of Gettysburg, sharpshooters took positions there. Thousands of men fought in the area surrounding Devil's Den on the second day of the battle, and hundreds were killed. You might think that's why the place is called Devil's Den, but actually the residents of Gettysburg already knew it by that name before the battle ever took place. Local legend held that an enormous black snake lived among the boulders. The snake was called the Devil, hence the devil's den. Should they have called it Jesus's den instead? When people living in the area heard that there was supposedly a gigantic snake there among the rocks, should they have named the snake Jesus? But see, that's what I'm talking about. That little detour through local history I just dragged you down, I think that stuff is interesting. It's part of the story of this place, which in turn is part of the story of my life, of the lives of everyone here. None of that matters to Christians like my buddy's mother-in-law, Devil's Backbone. I don't like it. They ought not be naming things after the devil. Go fuck yourself, you saintly shitwit. You know what else burns my ass about them? They would never tolerate this kind of behavior from people in other religions. The way these Christians have to make everything about their God, if a Muslim did that, if a Muslim was always shoehorning talk of Allah into conversations or insisting that everything should be named after Muhammad, Christians like the ones I've been talking about would lose their fucking minds. Shit, most of them lose their minds at the thought of Muslims peacefully practicing their faith amongst themselves and not bothering anyone. Like I said, they might not be the very worst kind of Christian. I do suspect many of them are also bigots and dominionists and white supremacists, but not necessarily. Even if being this kind of Christian is the worst thing about them, though, that's enough for me to not want to be around them, which ought to be fine with them, as I can't imagine they would much enjoy my company either. This little planet of ours can be such a beautiful place. And humanity is so rich with diversity, so creative and imaginative. And I find it annoying, but also genuinely sad, how many people I've known or known of who refuse to engage with anything cultural that is not explicitly Christian, except under protest. They're always boasting about how great their God is, the God of creation, the God who once sealed a promise to humanity with a rainbow. But if that's true, why, when they describe it, does the world he made always sound so monochrome and small?